People assume recreational drugs are just part of modern life. Coffee to wake up, alcohol to unwind, sugar, nicotine, stimulants to get through the day. The story we tell ourselves is simple. People like intoxication, so societies build products around it. But for most of human history, intoxicants weren't products at all. They were rituals. They were embedded in ceremony, community, and shared meaning. So what happens when those rituals disappear and pleasure becomes something that can be bought, taxed, and mass-produced? And if the chemistry didn't really change, what exactly did? Drugs and Addiction, an Anarchist Perspective, Dickie Dredd. This is part 27 of the video series. Chapter 3, The Natural Urge to Alter Consciousness. And we're on section 25, From Ritual to Recreation. The Industrial Revolution transformed intoxication from sacrament to sales pitch. What had once been ceremony became machinery. Pleasure, once an act of communion, was repackaged as commodity. As Courtwright noted, the 17th and 19th centuries witnessed a psychoactive revolution, when sugar, coffee, alcohol and opium became the lubricants of empire. Each new stimulant or sedative travelled the same routes as slaves and spices, binding continents in an economy of craving. Even beer, the most ancient of these intoxicants, carries this shift in its story. In medieval England, it was safer to drink than water. Fermentation killed disease. Hence the phrase small beer, an idiom for something inconsequential, but it comes from a time when people drank ale instead of water because water wasn't fit for human consumption. The ale had to be very low alcohol so that people didn't get drunk. Beer was, therefore, not indulgence but hygiene. So central was it that the Magna Carta's clause on standard measures for wine and beer dealt not with morality but taxation, the first move in regulating intoxication as industry. By the early modern era, taverns had replaced temples as the communal site of altered consciousness. The ritual bowl became the landlord's mug, the sacred toast of the evening trade. Colonial expansion globalised this commerce of pleasure. Sugar from the Caribbean, sweetened rum for the British Navy, coffee from Yemen kept clerks awake in London. Opium from India and China financed imperial wars. Each substance carried its own contradiction: stimulant and sedative, liberation and exploitation, and together they rewired humanity's daily rhythm. What had once been ritual became recreation, measured in shillings and shifts rather than prayers and moons. Industrialisation amplified the pattern. Distilleries, refineries and plantations turned mood into mechanism. Rum fuelled sailors, gin dulled the factories, coffee sustained bureaucrats, tobacco soothed the overworked clerk. Pleasure became infrastructure. The intoxication that once marked feast days now underpinned the working week. The market learned that fatigue and craving could be managed together. The worker drinks to work and works to drink. As Alexander argues, addiction thrives when meaning collapses into routine. Where ceremony once gave rhythm to desire, the factory replaced it with repetition. The Age of Empire perfected what might be called managed desire. Consumption and control became two sides of the same ledger. Advertised and invited indulgence, law imposed shame. Hence the same state that taxed alcohol also criminalised drunkenness. Moral panic served profit. The gin craze of the 18th century London, immortalised in Hogarth's prints, reflected not the excess of the poor but the hypocrisy of the rich. The British East India Company trafficked opium abroad while preaching temperance at home. Pleasure became export and prohibition domestic policy, the twin moralities of capitalism. The industrial appetite for stimulation reached its extreme expression in war. During the Second World War, amphetamines became the chemistry of command, alertness without reflection. The German Wehrmacht issued millions of Pervitin tablets, which is methamphetamine. The British and American forces distributed Benzedrine for endurance on night missions. Speed turned exhaustion into obedience and fear into function. What begun as battlefield necessity leaked into post-war civilian life, where truck drivers, students and night shift workers inherited the same logic of managed energy. As shown earlier in section 23, the state's interest in regulating pleasure was matched only by its appetite for regulating performance. A process fractured community. Where connection countered compulsion, the destruction of communal ritual created the soil for addiction. Industrial modernity privatised intoxication. The solitary drinker replaced the village feast. The same substances remained, but their meanings inverted. Rum once sealed a deal between equals, now it numbed the exploitation. Coffee houses once hosted revolution, now they sell productivity. Each cup or bottle holds both memory and amnesia, a trace of old ceremony and the erasure of its purpose. From an anarchist view, this transformation reads as enclosure. Just as the commons of land were fenced for profit, the commons of consciousness were fenced by market law. The rituals that once governed moderation were replaced by supply and demand. Choice multiplied while context vanished, the perfect consumer's freedom. Even rebellion became market segment. Counterculture sold back to itself through branding and licensed intoxication. Today's caffeine, alcohol, nicotine and sugar are the legal drugs of managed desire. Stimulants for labour, sedatives for recovery. The same circuitry that once linked shamanic trance to community now links the consumer to the checkout. Every craving monetised, every excess pathologised. The industrial age turned the human nervous system into a marketplace. As Marte observes, a society that isolates must sell comfort in pieces. Addiction is the price of disconnection. The story of ritual becoming recreation is therefore the story of pleasure's capture. When ecstasy became economy, intoxication lost its innocence. What was once conversation with nature became contract with capital. To recover ritual is not nostalgia, but necessity, a step towards reclaiming agency over the chemistry of curiosity first explored in section 21. Until that happens, desire will remain managed, and every sip, puff or pill another entry on the balance sheet of empire. The next section follows this shift to its modern endpoint, the birth of prohibition as faith system, a creed that confesses order with salvation. So the real shift wasn't the substances themselves. What changed was the context. Ritual became recreation, and pleasure became industry. Once intoxication moved into the market, consumption and control grew together. Substances sold for profit, but also regulated, taxed and moralised. So if addiction expands, most where connection collapses. What does that say about the society we built around these substances? In the next video, we'll follow this transformation to its logical conclusion, the birth of prohibition, where the state begins treating intoxication not just as commerce, but as sin. So up next, still in chapter 3, we're at part 26, the politics of prohibition.